Oliver, it's nice to meet you, mate, and good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, straight out the gate, let's dive into a little bit of a rundown of you, your story. Give people the wherever you want to start with that, a little bit around your background, your disability, and also some achievements to date. So I'm allowing you to start wherever you want, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, gosh. Okay. I guess I always start, with, me at school. I think, back when I was at school, I was able-bodied. I was born with a disability, but it hadn't yet got bad enough for me to call it a disability as such at that point. I wasn't on crutches, and I tried not to let it hold me back. And I kind of wanted to be a normal kid. I was pretty average. I didn't really like sport. And I guess fast forward a few years, I just finished university. I started having to come to terms with my leg and my disability, my crutches. And I had a doctor's appointment one day, and they basically said, well, you can live with it or amputate it. Either way, it's never going to be fixed 100%. There's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of swelling, and, you'll never be an athlete either way. And I guess that really kind of started the question for me of, well, why not? And so I snowballed out of control into this journey of fitness, exploration. What is it like? What is it like living your life on crutches? There's no handbook for it. What was I capable of? And I got into obstacle course racing. It kind of snowballed into other fitness bits around the gym and runs. And eventually I found myself in a doctor's appointment again, thinking, gosh, I'm going to be making a career of being a professional obstacle course racer with a disability, like an adaptive athlete. That's going to be my new career. And he kind of asked me, I remember he was like, well, what sport do you do? He's a sports doctor, checking out my heart and everything. And I was like, I do these races on my crutches, like Spartan races with Tough Mudders and stuff. And he kind of paused and he was like, well, it's not really a sport, is it? And I was like, God, you're kind of right, but I hate that you're right, because I guess you kind of you turn up, you get a medal for finishing, and there's no competitive element, especially for me. I know that some people do it competitively, but for me, it was just a case of, could I finish it? And this kind of really struck me, because I was like, yeah, I'm an athlete, I'm a disabled athlete, I'm doing these races. And so I kind of sat down that night and I Googled Paralympic sports, and I came up with wheelchair fencing. I was holding control tab and making loads of tabs for every Paralympic sport I could find. I found wheelchair fencing. And so I had about 6 months left of my gap year after I finished university. I gave myself 6 months. I said, I was 6 months into it rather, so I had 6 months left. I said, okay, well, let's see how far I can take this. I remember it was 2017. It was August. I started, so I called every fencing club in London. And yeah, I started fencing. Long story short, Tokyo was around the corner. I said, well, I don't just want to do this at the weekends. I want to do it 100%. I want to see how far I can take this. I guess if I had to summarize it, it would be I always want to find the limit. And so I pushed it as hard as I could. I said, well, let's see if I can qualify for the games, having just taken up the sport. And obviously the games were delayed, but come 2021, I qualified for Tokyo. I went to Tokyo, which was great, amazing experience. And I came back with 2 medals, which was amazing. And yeah, so that's basically been my journey into parasport. It was a bit of a weird one, but now I guess I'm European champ in team event. I'm Commonwealth champ in the team event as well. Triple national champ now. Double Paralympic medalist and world medalist, which all sounds very surreal for me, because I would never see myself as an athlete. I just kind of feel like I was in the wrong place at the right time.
I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna take us back a little bit.
Sure.
Talk to us about the diagnosis. Talk to us about. You didn't mention how old you were when all of that was happening. So I'm curious as to know how old you were and what's the actual diagnosis and what it physically means for you. How does it affect you?
Yeah, so I was born with something called Klippel-Trenaunay syndrome. It's a bit of a mouthful. And basically what that means is I've got a malformed venous system. So my veins, I basically got double the amount of, double the vascular system that the average person would have. And so what that results in is like a lot of swelling, because obviously double the amount of blood goes into my leg. And basically the whole leg swells up. I've got a lot of pain, a lot of birthmarks, a lot of kind of swelling. And I have to wear a kind of a really like industrial strength, like compression stocking at all times to basically stop my leg from like blowing up like a balloon essentially. And so around the age of, I was born with it, but around the age of 8 was when it got much worse. The swelling, the pain was very bad. Obviously I was growing at the time, and my veins and nerves and everything were growing at different length. And it was a real struggle. So I remember I went on crutches around that age, and due to the fact that I wasn't using my leg then on crutches, my leg got a lot worse, and now it's kind of in fixed flexion, so I can't actually straighten it or weight bear on it. I still have the pain and stuff like that, and swelling is still there, but essentially now it's kind of immovable. I can't really use the leg too much, unfortunately.
Is that because with the increased amount of blood flow, as soon as you start to work it, it obviously brings more blood flow into the leg, increases swelling, so it almost becomes just a snowball effect on on the leg itself?
What is funny, even if I stand up, if I stand up, you could measure my leg. It literally you would see it expand. And to put it in perspective, my right leg obviously takes the brunt of most of my physical activity, and it's not as my quads and my thighs, they're not small. My left leg is almost the same size, but it has, no muscle mass at all in it, purely due to the kind of the mass of the extravascular system. And when I stand up, if I'm not wearing the compression stocking, like it's like a tree trunk. It's so much larger, and it's obviously all the blood going into it from gravity, and it's just super painful. And it's a struggle.
So you're similar to me, I guess, in the sense that people that are listening that may not know my story with having Poland syndrome, missing right pectoral muscle and things like that. I understand, I sort of can empathize a little bit when you have a part of the body that is not functioning how it should, and then other parts of the body sometimes pick up some of that slack. You said about your other leg is essentially is fine. And do you find you get these asymmetries that are then parts of you that you have to manage? So I said, where I'm going with this is, what is your sort of management of this? And what are sort of the asymmetrical outcomes that you end up getting that you might have to manage?
It's a really good question. And I know that there are some, like there's this, I've read somewhere, I think that there's very little research into the asymmetry, but I've heard somewhere that if you have an asymmetry in the body physically, you end up burning, I think, about 30% more calories doing anything, just because it's so much less efficient for your body. I don't know if that's true. You got to fact check.
That sounds real. I mean, man, that sounds just anecdotally, it sounds about right. Sounds, because I feel like I have had experiences where I've done things, and I think I've had this my message going on in my mind for a little while now, which is I feel like I need to add an extra day or so of recovery in order for me to get the gain in which I have from my training, rather than doing a 6-day cycle a week and then having 1 day off, actually doing like a 5 and a 2. I've found a little bit more benefit from that. Recently, I've actually introduced that. And I don't think I did that when I was a pro, because that makes sense. Like, it makes sense that burning a little bit more nutritionally, it's a little bit harder to get food in the sense that you've got to like really dose up a little bit more in order to gain the repair. And I think back to when I was in like bulking season, when I was about 15 to 20, and the food that I was eating, like, it was astronomical amounts, and like now I don't eat anywhere near that amount, and I'm not obviously gaining as much muscle. So man, that's got me thinking. That's an interesting one.
It's really strange, because actually funny that you mentioned that about the kind of, the recovery element of it, because I've never realized it because of that, but I do take a lot longer to recover because I sleep less well because of my leg. But like you said, with things taking more effort, if that is the case, because we're asymmetric, actually funny enough, since Tokyo, the boys, they train Monday to Friday at my squad rather, at our centralized hub in Bath, is where wheelchair fencing is based. But I was finding that, because I'm based in London, so I would come back Friday nights and I would be exhausted. I'd be absolute knockout for Friday night. Saturday day, I was an absolute mess. It was only about Sunday lunchtime that I started to be able to open my eyes, feel a little bit recovered. And then I'd have to be like meal prepping and getting ready to go to Bath again for training the next week. So I changed my, early on after Tokyo, I changed my training regime whereby I would come back on a Thursday evening after training, train in London on Friday morning, which I've just done. And then as of finishing training, so about lunchtime, I would be instantly into recovery mode. So I spend the rest of the day having a hot bath, stretching out, recovering, eating, sleeping, and getting ready. And that just means that then come Monday, although I'm training from London, and it's a lighter day than if I was going to be at the training center in Bath with the other guys, it actually means it allows me to recover so much better. So I hit Monday much sharper than if I did Friday.
Yeah, I think that's one. I never like looking back on my career and saying I would have done this differently. I'm always a big proponent of I did what I did with the information I had in front of me. I think now, with the age that we live in, I finished in 2016. Podcasting, I guess all the information you can get from something like a podcast or just in general social media that's just being shared.
Yeah.
I think of someone like Andrew Huberman's podcast with the amount of information that he sends out on a scientific basis. If that was available when I was 15, 16, with the mindset that I had around trying to develop myself by give me anything that I need to try and improve, I think there would have been, it just would have looked so different. I think it would have looked completely different. My environment, my sport has probably, it's taken a long time for the sports science side to come along. Anything like a Paralympic or an Olympic sport that's sort of, that is definitely built on, and this is a massive generalization for Olympic and Paralympic sports, it's much less skill-based, not yours, but it's much less skill. Like if you think of running, swimming, things like that. Cricket, very intricate sport with its skill level that you need. It meant that strength and conditioning, sports science was the thing that had to catch up with everything else. Whereas in Olympic sport, it's very well documented. I've got many books on it about sort of the arms race in sports science that happens in those sports around the world. So I'm fascinated in that sort of, that little learner that you've put in front of me, and I definitely am gonna look that up. I've seen a big difference myself in that.
Yeah,
sure.
I think recovery has become a huge thing that's changed a lot in the last few years. And what I've number one, I train as hard as I can, and there's only so many hours in the day that I can train, and I give it that. And I know other people train as, not everyone trains as hard as me because I give it 100%, and I pride myself on the work that I put in. But I know there are some other people out there who are complete nutcases as well. Mm-hmm. But I no one recovers like me. I recover, I put a lot of effort into, 100% outside of fencing and training. And, my sleep hygiene is a huge thing for me, my recovery now. And that is a big sacrifice in itself because, you go to the gym, you go to, the fencing style on piste, when you're in the chair, you're sacrificing a lot. You know what I mean? You're giving your body, you're giving a lot in that sense. But, outside social events, it's sleep, it's the, what are you doing before sleep? You look at your phone, how are you recovering? How are you eating? All this kind of stuff that people, I think they neglect, because especially as some of the younger athletes, I'm a bit older now, I'm 30. And for me, it's become something that's, I need it for my body, but also I want to give myself the best chance of succeeding. And for me, that's not just the time I put into the piste, but it's the recovery that I put in so that I can put in 100% on the piste.
I think having an impairment levels you and it humbles you to a point where you actually do things right. And I say that because my journey was playing with able-bodied athletes. So I was unique in the sport that I was playing. But I was so diligent on, I mean, I implemented yoga into my recovery early on, sort of way earlier than other teammates did. I would embrace any sort of new recovery just to make myself feel better. But it was built off the fact that I knew I needed to, because otherwise I'm going to get more asymmetry. I'm struggling with this, that, and the other a little bit more than other people. And I think that's where my frustration sometimes comes in with fully able-bodied athletes, which is they wait until that they are hurt, or they've hit a wall, or they've had a setback when they actually make the change. Yeah. And the problem is you put in a huge amount of risk into... There's no telling how long that time off could be. You could tear a hamstring, be out for a few weeks. You could do an ACL, be out for 12 months. But either way, like, you have to ask your question, like, did I do everything to my best ability? Did I do that recovery the way I did? Did I have enough massages? Did I take on yoga? Did I take on stretching? Did I warm up correctly? Did I do all these things to put myself in the best place? And I think when you have an impairment, you ask that, or you seek those answers a little sooner, because you're kind of forced into it, which is, I've said this many times on the podcast around, I'm a big, sad thing to say, but proponent for young athletes getting injured early to humble them and to make them feel not like they're not invincible.
Exactly. And it's funny, like, like you said, you do the best you can with what you've got, available to you at the time, in terms of whether it be knowledge and ability. It's a very controversial thing to say, para athletes are generally better athletes than able-bodied athletes, because, I don't want to create a divide here, and obviously it's an impossible thing to measure. However, going from what you said, and I totally agree with it, is that to be a para athlete, what does it take? And to be an athlete in general, I think a lot of people throw around this word athlete, whereas actually, I thought I was, I thought I was a fitness, when I started doing the obstacle course races, I thought I was an athlete. I called myself an athlete. When was I an athlete looking back at it? No. I think I only recently, after about 5 years, I feel comfortable calling myself an athlete, elite athlete, a performance athlete. And I think the reason for that is because everything in my life, it's not about just being excellent on piste or trying to be excellent in the gym. It's about being excellent, across the board. And what that looks like, coming back to what you said, as a para athlete, you can't take things for granted. And if you take even just to get to training, look, if you're in a wheelchair, loading up your car, getting into your car, especially with all your kit and stuff, it's longer. It takes more effort. It's more difficult. It's harder to do, to even get yourself into training. So that one thing is the sacrifice is greater. What it means to you, the drive, and actually the desire, the hunger, as a para athlete, you have, in my opinion, you're overcoming a lot. You're overcoming your own body. You're overcoming the limitations. You're pushing yourself past, and to a level whereby I think a lot of able-bodied people, they take their bodies for granted. Whereas with people with disabilities, you want it, and the desire is there, because you understand, well, my body is not maybe functioning in the way that I would love it to be, or is optimal or able-bodied, but I'm going to push it past those limits. Like, I don't care. I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to push it to the next level. And you need to have that certain hunger, that desire to really kind of push yourself. But also then on top of that, like you said, as a para athlete, I know that, well, if I want to compete at the highest level because of my disability, I need to optimize my life. That I need the 1%. I need to recover well. I need to eat well. I need to make sure my cardio's, the best it can be. My flexibility is the best. And you don't take your body for granted, because almost like you said, you've been humbled by your own body in a way. And so I think there are a lot of able-bodied people who maybe don't see that, or like you said, until they get the injury, they realize, oh God, I maybe should be a bit more diligent about X, Y, and Z. And so, like I said, it's impossible. These things are so subjective to measure who's a better, and in a way, it's irrelevant. But I think being a para athlete sometimes does make you think about these things a little bit more.
I really like the idea of this levels of athlete. And I think that's naming someone an athlete is a very subjective term. I think it's a very, it gets lost a little bit. And I think of things when, like you were talking around Tough Mudders and Spartan races and stuff like that. I think of like CrossFit. I think of all of the various different, I would say, non-traditional sports. I'm sorry if anyone's listening and they're CrossFitter. I might even get into it soon, but I would say, they're not sort of like the traditional, what you might find on Sky Sports type thing. That's what I kind of mean by that.
Yeah.
And this idea of levels of athlete, because even if you're on the journey to being a professional, even if you're on the journey to being an Olympic or Paralympic athlete, there's a level at which you're at, right? And interestingly, diving into the performance psychology and the sports psychology literature around elite athletes, there's even studies around what makes the difference between an elite athlete and a super elite athlete.
Yeah.
And they were discovering that these super elite athletes are the ones that have multiple medals. They are the ones that keep coming back to, like, they don't just have one Olympic Games where they succeed. They come back time and time again, and they're staying on at that level.
It's interesting. Do you think that that results impact the level of athlete that you are?
Again, this is a very subjective term, because you're defining success as an athlete on outcome results. Now, do we want the extrinsic rewards as an athlete? Yes, that's why we have the goals and the ambitions and we strive towards it. However, those come at a cost, only being extrinsically valued. We lose our self-worth in them. We lose our value of who we are. And you only have to look at many different stories from athletes of who have strove after these goals and these ambitions to get them, and then go, who am I? It's because it's been at the cost of the intrinsic, which is, who am I? What am I about? Why do I do this? What process am I enjoying in the journey that I'm enjoying in this? So I'm a big believer in that being an elite athlete is a character and a mindset. And it's nothing to do with the fact that that's the work I'm in, but it's more the fact that this is what I genuinely believe. You can be a amateur footballer, but you can have a professional mindset. And you can be elite in what you do and the way you do things, and there's an elite. So there's the way everyone else does things, and then there's how someone who is elite does it. Again, you look at the military, right? There's almost levels within that. You look at the SAS over something like the TA, and they would go, they're the elite of the elite. They're the elite of the elite. Like, and that's their idea of there are still levels to go, and it's almost because there will always be somewhere where people will drop off. There will be an element where people go, that's just not the level I'm at or where I'm wanting to go. But there'll be others that go, yep, I want to be at that level. That's the level I want to be. And I think when we start thinking of that, that's what it is. And again, it's mindset. It's nothing to do with demographic, like, because you can have elite demographics and they get a bad rap. But I think it's a mindset.
I would tend to agree with you on that. I think you can win a lot and not be a great athlete. I think you can lose and, not be decorated, but be a brilliant athlete. And I was watching actually with a Tour de France documentary on Netflix the other day, and that really, it exemplifies that, because you see all these people, and all of these cyclists, there's hundreds of them, are incredible athletes. Their whole life is about this race, and they're incredible endurance athletes. They understand what to do. They've got millions, of miles on their belt, and their fitness levels are incredible. Their commitment is insane. Their sacrifice. They're excellent, in my opinion, examples of athletes. And then you see them and they race, and they're like, oh, I'm going for the win on this one. This is my one. I'm going for it. I didn't win it today. I didn't have the legs for it. Does it make him any less of an athlete because he didn't win that stage? No. What about the other 100 athletes who didn't win? The one guy who won it, is he a better athlete? Yes, he won it as a result. Does it make him a better athlete? Now, this is where you need to divide athlete and result. Because I look at the rest of those athletes and I think, God, they're brilliant athletes. But like you said, did they win that stage? Regardless of whether they ever win a stage, it doesn't matter. They're incredible athletes. They don't have the results. Look at the domestiques. They ride for one other person on their team to go past the line and win. they're not winning. They're not crossing the line. They're not wearing the yellow jersey, but they are incredible athletes. And this is what I mean, is I think, especially recently in today's society with, you have fitness influencers. And I saw this really funny thing the other day on like the difference between it's like a fitness influencer and an elite athlete. And it had like rest days. I don't know if you've seen this. And it had like the fitness influencer, like, I wake up, I drink a glass of water, I go for a stretch. Just because it's, your rest day doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. So I go for a little jog to stay active at 7 a.m. and I spend 20 minutes in the sunshine. And then it's got like elite athlete and they're just in bed. And then it's got like, oh, after that, I have a really healthy meal of this and that, the other, and I drink another glass of water, I do some yoga, and I document my mind and my thoughts in a journal. And then it's like elite athlete, sleeping. And it's like, and it goes on and does all these juxtapositions between like the idea of being what you do on your day off to really enrich your life and yourself. And it's basically your athlete that eats loads of food and then goes back to bed and watches Netflix. And I'm like, that is so true. Because every athlete, I know, elite athlete, I know my teammate, for example, he's an Paralympic champ, sorry. What does he do on his day off? He plays Call of Duty and like veggies out like the slug on the sofa. And so do we all, because you're pushing your body to the limit in training and your mind. And then like, if you told me on my day off, if I told my coach on my day off, I'm going to go for a morning run, and okay, everyone's different, and whatever gives you energy and however you recover best, because we all recover differently, fair play to you. But so I'm going for this and that, and then I'm going to do that and then journal this, that. He'd be like, is that really how you want to rest? Like, and it just shows the difference between these, some people, they think they're athletes, and I was there. I call myself an athlete when I was someone who did sport. When I think there's a huge difference between someone who does sport, someone who does fitness, an athlete, an elite athlete, and then like a performance athlete, like an elite performance athlete. The top level. You're talking, your Olympians, your Paralympians.
It's such an interesting topic, mate, and I think that there's a story that came out. It's on this show. It was an early episode with Pete Mitchell, who's a former schoolmate of mine, and he actually he was on the Olympic program to be track cyclist in sprint cycling.
Weird.
Unfortunately, he got released from the team, but then he went into paracycling as a pilot rider.
Cool.
World champion, silver medal at Paras, world record, and one of the things that the stories he tells in there was on one of his days off, and he was going with, so essentially the way Team GB cycling was they were so stringent, this is in their high success period of 2008 to 2016. Yeah. And they were so heavy on recovery for these guys. They literally just, if they rung you up and you weren't on the sofa with off your legs, they were angry. Like they were just furious. And one day he had this thing booked in with his child and his now wife, and they wanted to go to Chester Zoo. And he's like, I'm gonna be walking around Chester Zoo here. Like I've got to get out of this somehow. But she's like, no. Naomi's like, no. We've organised this day as a family. So okay. So he calls up Chester Zoo and he says, do you have a mobility scooter? I need a mobility scooter. I'm with Team GB. I wondered if I could borrow it. And if anyone needs it, like I'll just bring it straight back. So he goes around Chester Zoo on this mobility scooter to get off his legs. Yeah. And I just think of that, like, there's no way an elite athlete's thinking, I'm going to go and spend time with my family and like I want to do. And while there are, so do you know what? There are athletes that are seeking that, because you've got to get the mental space and everything you need. But when it comes down to, especially Olympic sports, especially Paralympic sports, again, which I will exaggerate over how there's such a high demand on the body compared to skill on the majority, again, talking blanket statement. Yes. There is so much on that every second counts to the physical performance. I remember listening to I had Nick Littlehales on the podcast, who was at the time, he worked for Team Sky in the Tour de France. Yeah. And he's a sleep specialist, sleep expert. And he said, like, the guys there would cross the line on a stage. Yeah. And then it was quite literally, as the clock had stopped, they've gone over the line, their internal clock stopwatch started on how quickly they could get through press, massage, recovery, and into bed. It was like it was a race. It was another race had begun. And there was no time for like just messing around. It was just getting like, and it's the thing when you're in elite sport and at that highest level, you just realize like how simplistic it can be. But it's because of the work rate. It's because of the work rate, and you need it.
It's so funny. Two things on that. One thing is about the British cycling. Our physio, Olivia, she used to be she went to Rio actually. She's in the team pursuit team for the women's track team. Amazing athletes, and she was saying how they would wear heart rate sensors, and they would like track to the team. And if your heart rate was high, they'd be like, or the steps were too high on their rest days, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, why are you walking around? Like, you've done more than like 500 steps today. Like, you're not allowed to be on legs. They also weren't allowed to drive themselves into training, apparently, because it was too mentally stressful and tiring. They'd had to be driven there.
Yeah, that's wild.
Wild. And then the second thing, funny enough, is what you said about, which actually gives me such a glow, and I'm so happy to hear it, because I respect these people in the Tour de France so much as amazing athletes. And it's wild because, you know, when we were in Tokyo, one thing we really practiced was all the other things outside of it. And so we would spend ages and do simulations and meetings and talks about, okay, so we just finished fencing. Okay, cool. We're coming off piste. Okay, we've got media. Then after media, we've got packing our kit. Okay, how do we do media most efficiently? How do we pack our kit then most efficiently? So when we've done the medals, we can take the medals, go, we're on the bus. We're on the bus. How do we get back? You know, how do we wear our night glasses so we don't have the blue light? Okay, do we have earphones? Okay, so then when we get off the bus, how do we eat now? Okay, so are we eating at home? Are we going straight to the canteen quickly to grab food? Are we going straight back? What's the best way I can brush my teeth? Are my clothes laid out already for the next day? Do I know what I'm doing? So, you know, all of these things to streamline. Like when you finish, it's like, okay, what is the next goal now? The next goal is, how can I be the most recovered for the next day? Okay, cool. And then once I've done that, the next goal is to perform. And then once I've done that, again and again. And it's exactly the same now. Like, you know, that's what it was at the games. But I've finished now training. I literally just walked in the door actually as I jumped on the call with you from my training. And my goal now until Monday is, how can I be the most recovered until Monday morning session? So I can hit Monday morning as hard as possible, and that week so I can get as much out of it. Because if I'm not recovered for that, I'm not going to be able to give 100% on piece. I'll give 90%, and then maybe by Tuesday I'll be firing on all cylinders. That's a day lost. If I lose a day or half a day every week, that adds up.
I think there's a blend to be had, though. You know, I think there's so much to be said around losing yourself in the pursuit of your goal and
Agreed.
Trying to do everything where you cross every T and dot every I, but at the cost of it being about you enjoying the process of actually doing it. What is it?
Yeah.
There's probably a difference between actually the pursuit of the goal and the actual meaning of the goal. And like, what does it really mean to me? And like, how do I bring the most meaning to this exploration that I'm going on of myself in pursuit of a goal?
I agree.
So I think there has to be a development in that, because life is different now as well, right? Like there are different distractions that are in our way and athletes' way. So I think it's really important, because well-being is so important, and we are now seeing the stories of athletes that have neglected their well-being over years at the pursuit of their goals. And it's kind of looking like, okay, well, I'm after this goal, but I do want to make sure that I'm of sound body and mind by the time I come out of it.
At what cost?
And I'm not a selfish asshole that no one wants to talk to. So, like, it's really important that we do take that to account. So I think the solution ends up being you have to be super diligent in your packaging. So take your weekend, for example. Like, you can find something to enjoy your weekend, right? But you got to do it with half an eye on knowing that I'm not going out and getting blasted. I'm not going out and being on my feet, on my crutches all the time, all day, every day, all weekend. I'm just going to do the things that are going to get me by to have enough enjoyment so that by the time I'm at Monday, I've got enough out of it.
So this is really funny. It's really interesting, actually. So I agree totally. And I think where people go wrong is they see a black and white of like, this is recovery, this is training. So what's in your mind stereotypically when you think of recovery? Resting, sleeping, eating well, not moving around. Well, actually, is that recovery? I don't know. The thing is the way we look at it is 100% me outside fencing and 100% me within fencing. So I personally, I'm not a very sociable guy. You won't catch me, even before fencing and stuff like that, before sport, going to the pub to have loads of beers. Like, it's just not something that I enjoy that much. So it requires energy from me to do that, right? Whereas my teammate, he loves to be social. He loves to go see his friends. He loves to go for coffees, go for a beer with his mates, go to a jazz bar and hang out. That gives him energy, and he loves that. And so our weekends look very different. My weekend looks like I'm just kind of hanging out on the sofa, relaxing, You couldn't catch me in a bar out past 9 p.m. Whereas with him, he's going and he's seeing friends, he's going to see coffee, that person, this person. But the result is that he's recovered because those things give him energy. Like, for example, have you ever done something that, like hanging out with a mate is although maybe it's tiring, you go for a walk, you do something actually exerting, but you leave with feeling like, God, that was so great. Like, I really enjoyed doing that. That was so nice to see that person. And it gives you energy. Those are the things we focus on. So whether it's obviously, like you said, there is a balance here between, yes, going out, staying up all night. But the idea of 100% me outside of sport is so that, actually, if I want to go and play Xbox for 3 hours and just be sat and do that's with my friends, it's a waste of time, but actually I'm mentally recovering. I'm socializing with my friends online. That gives me energy. If I want to go for an early morning swim in the cold, so I love doing that. That's something that I really enjoy, is like ice morning swims out in outdoor pools like Hampstead Heath and things like that. Technically, yes, waking up early, going there, actually swimming, the physical shock of the cold, it will take physical energy. However, I leave feeling like, wow, that was so much fun. It's something that I enjoy, something I'm passionate about, and it gives me life and gives me energy. So that overall, I come back to 100, I tick those boxes outside of fencing so that when I come back into fencing, I feel good. And here's an example of where it goes wrong, is where I remember I went to World Cup recently and I was so focused on my performance. And I was like, oh God, the guys are downstairs competing. I want to go see them compete, but I can't. It's going to be too exhausting. It's going to be too tiring to be in the venue. I need to sit in my room and rest. I need to rest. Resting is what I need at the moment because I need to be on form for and recovered for my performance. And I was sat there and I was really anxious. I was like, oh, what do I do? I'll go down for a little bit. I'll come back up. And I was like, I wasn't resting. I wasn't enjoying myself. I was forcing myself to recover, to rest, when actually I was just depleting energy for myself because I felt anxious. I wanted to go and see the guys compete. I didn't. I need to go to bed now. It's 9 p.m. I'm not tired yet. Well, I need to sleep for tomorrow. I force myself to sleep. I sit there anxious. I don't sleep well. And I fence awfully because I put so much pressure on myself to recover, to do the right thing, to, and like you said, you lose yourself in that. On the flip side of that, I did the next World Cup, with this 100% me. I went downstairs. I said, I want to go support the guys. Yes, being in the venue is exhausting. Yes, cheering them on is exhausting. Going there is tiring. But I went there, the energy, I'm shouting for my teammates. I'm like enjoying it. I'm like, let's go. I'm loving it. And I come out feeling like, I feel charged. I feel revitalized. I feel, I feel like I'm full of energy because it's given me that energy. And so, yes, I agree there needs to be a balance, but actually rather than thinking about it as recovery, think about it as actually 100% you.
Yeah, I think it's also about, the only thing I'd add to that is the fact that it's just making sure you're not going towards the damaging road. Do you know what I mean? Like you can do all those things, but technically sort of what you're talking about, none of it's really, it's not going out partying. It's not really staying up the late hours. It's just going and doing something that's speaking to that inner part of you.
Yes.
This is why I think it's it's so important that athletes understand their personality early. And it's something that I did as a team in my team environment that allowed us to know more about each other, but know more about ourselves. And through simple personality tests, there's many out there that you can take. What you'll do is you'll just find out where you are on extroversion. So what we found out as a team was essentially the analogy I would give is it's guys at the bar. So when we would finish a day or we would come into our hotel, there would be all the extroverts would be at the bar and they would be energizing themselves by being around people. But all the introverted and less extroverted people would be in their rooms, sitting in there and energizing themselves, recovering, and that was their form of filling up their batteries, right, and recharging. And the thing is that socially, the guys at the bar looks more acceptable, and the guys in their room makes it look like they're shutting themselves away from a team environment. But when we did this, we were able to open up the channel of communication around both are good, both are perfect for those people. And actually further on, it allowed us to recognize when someone was not in a good spot. So if someone who was usually at the bar is in their room isolating themselves, they may not be in a good way. And that's when we would recognize, okay, go get him out of the room, bring him in, even if he's kind of not come kicking and screaming, but it's going to be for his own good. We recognize, or at least go and check on them to make sure that they're okay, 100%. Because they're not at the bar where they would be getting their energy, because we know that's what it's like. So both from a team perspective, but from your own individual perspective, doing a personality test to understand where you lie, where you get your energy as an athlete, it's super important. And the earlier people can do that, they'll then start to recognize the patterns of where they get that energy, where they don't. And yeah, you're off to a winner.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, that sums it up perfectly. Yeah. Where do you get your energy from?
There was something that we flicked past, which I want to come back to, which is the mindset of para-athletes. Now, this is something I find interesting, and I do want to get onto your sport.
Sure.
But the mindset of para-athletes was something that I, from outside looking in, always had this perception of they are these driven, like warriors that are like beating every barrier that comes in their way. And then I went and spent a afternoon and a day with one of the British para squads, the British swimming para squad, right?
Sure.
And I got to go and meet them, and I met one of the coaches, and I'm seeing all these athletes, and I'm like in awe of how they're doing what they're doing. And there's some incredible athletes there, and they'd all just come back from Rio. Yeah. And I'd asked him, I said, what Rio was a success. They'd won more medals than they did in London. They'd been the first nation to ever better their medal tally. And so from outside, it looked like a really big success. But he said, internally, we set goals on PBs, because in swimming, with the categories that there are some athletes that essentially just through pure discrepancy in disabilities, they kind of stand on the blocks and they almost know they're going to win before they win. So he said we knew that with a few athletes, and so what we did was we set personal best goals for them to beat times. And he said we missed that target. We missed that. We had athletes that didn't try to beat those targets. They won medals, but they didn't beat that. And I asked him, I said, why did that happen? Why did these athletes not try? He said, because there was a fear of well, they just wanted to play it safe, but there was also a fear of potentially going and pushing themselves that level and not getting it. But they knew if they played it safe, if they did it, they would just get the medal. And it really shocked me, and I asked him, I said, what does that mindset surprise you? And he said, not really, because he said, while you may from the outside think of these athletes as being heroes and inspirations, he said there are some in there, and this is again not a blanket statement of every athlete, he said, but there are some in there that have grown up being told that they're an inspiration. And that's due to, take swimming for example, you've got two kids, both are 12 years old, one's fully able-bodied, one's got disability. The kid that's 12 years old jumping in a pool at 6 o'clock in the morning, they're just having a crack, like they're having a right go at it. But that kid who's 12 years old with a disability, instantly an inspiration. And then there's a almost marketing that goes with it. And he said, if you are told that, and if you don't have the right support system around you, you don't have sort of all your ducks in a row, that you can lose your humility, but you can also lose your willingness to push yourself, and you can get you can get protected, almost over supported too much. And he said that's why people have this perception outside, but reality is they're just like every human being you've ever find. It's just there's a part of them that's either kind of not working the same way, sometimes missing, and that's the reality of it. And that perspective completely changed some of the ways in which I look at power. I don't look at it in any less of an inspiration and like any athlete. I just almost put everything back. I didn't think of para athletes being way above every other athlete. I just went, they're the same. Like they're the same as every other athlete. They're just incredible at what they do, but some of them can be flawed human beings. And that was a perspective I was really interested in, and I'm curious to see what you think.
And so there's definitely this like idea that like all disabled people are like really nice, and like there's this idea that like I don't know what it is, but like there's this idea that like if you're a disabled person, like you're really sweet. He's got a disability though. He's in a wheelchair. Like he's on crutches. And I think like I've heard that so many times from like para athletes, so from able-bodied people, and like these perceptions of para athletes. But it's like you said, we're all just the same. And however it manifests itself, like we are literally just people. By the way, we're all the same. We're just, my leg doesn't work. Like if you had your leg amputated, you would still be the same person, but without a leg. I've had people come up to me before and be like, I remember I left my first fencing club. This person was like, how are we supposed to trust disabled people now when you do something like this? And I was like, we're not a different species. We're not like aliens. Like also, by the way, like we're not like a race whereby like, how are you supposed to trust disabled people because one person is, we're not like we're all just people. Like fair enough if you don't trust me, but I'm a person. And like you said, there are these ideas of like, disabled people are inspirational. And I think that can be quite damaging, as you said. And the thing that I always say is, would it be inspirational if an able-bodied person did it? So when people are like, oh, wow, you're an inspiration because you made it to the Paralympics in like really, really short amount of time and you won medals there. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because if an able-bodied person did that, it would also be impressive. If I like carry my coffee to the car and someone's like, wow, you're such an inspiration for like getting out of bed and like not wallowing in self-pity. I'm like, but if an able-bodied person got out of bed and went to get a coffee and brought it to their car, you wouldn't be like, mind blow. You would just be like, okay, he's just get on with his life. So like the idea that actually, would it be inspirational if an able-bodied person did it? It's for me, that levels it. Like that's a good rule, if that makes sense.
I really like that. I think that's a nice one. I want to talk about fencing. So
sure.
Again, I said this to you sort of just before we started. I know very little about. I obviously have seen Olympic fencing, but I've seen para fencing. But yes. I have no idea how it works, and I'm curious as to knowing a little bit more about it. What's sort of involved in your training schedule and things like that.
Yeah, para fencing is great, and I guess for the viewers who obviously to describe it audibly is like it's imagine two people sat in chairs about a meter away from each other, maybe 1.5 meters, with swords just going completely ham. Like it's just the most like freakishly violent, dynamic, artistic, kind of beautiful sport, and it's this kind of marriage of like ferocity or dynamicism, like timing, tactics. It's beautiful. It's a great sport at the same time. It's like it's like boxing in a way. A lot of people compare it to boxing because it is that kind of two people. It's a martial art. It's a combat sport at the end of the day. And obviously fencing has a lot of heritage in terms of it's very classical. There's a lot of respect. There's a lot of history there, and it's a beautiful sport. And I'm actually from a creative background, and I love, I studied architecture, so I did a lot of video making and photography. And I love the way it looks. That's why I fell in love with fencing, is because just it like to the eye, it's even with the fencing, the kit, the mask, the swords, the way the blade bends, the things that we do, the actions, it's just very beautiful. It lends itself very much to the lens, and I love that. But to be more technical about it, like you said, there's 3 weapons. The fencer sits in a wheelchair, regardless of whether they're a wheelchair used in daily life. The wheelchairs are locked into a frame so that we don't fall out when we move, a distance away from each other, depending on the kind of reach of the two fences. And on guard prêt and you fight, you fence. You basically, it's 1 point for hitting the other person. It's first to 15. And there are two different categories at Paralympic level. One is category A, one is category B. The first is for people who have maybe lower limb disabilities like myself, but have full core and trunk function. Category B is for people who have less trunk function, so their maneuverability and their core stability is slightly less so, and their ability to change direction may be slightly less. So that's a category B. The interesting thing here is the team event, whereas in able body it's made of 3 fences. In para, it's made of 2 category A's and 1 category B. And so traditionally, with a category A, you will be stronger, faster, more dynamic than category B. So what is lovely about this is these 2 different categories in ability within the team. And then there's tactics as to where you play them, how you play them, when within the team you make your category B fence their category A's, and vice versa. Different tactics. So it's quite an interesting thing that maybe you don't see in able-bodied fencing.
Do you know do you know who's putting who forward, or is it sort of a random assignment and then it's like, that's what we've done?
So it's really interesting because so you're assigned, you have 3 players on the team. You're assigned 1, 2, or 3, or 4, 5, 6 for each team. And when you do that, basically you can choose who on your team is 1, 2, or 3, or 4, 5, or 6. And basically, what you're trying to do is then in the team event choose who fences who in what order. So you have to lock it in without knowing what they've done. So for example, there are tactics whereby most people put their best fencer on last. And same with the relay race, you want to, put your heavy hitter, your anchor, we call them the anchor, on last to bring it home for you. However, there's another tactic that some people do is whereby they'll put their heavy fencer on, but like third to last to fence against the other team's weakest fencer to get a huge advantage. And then so almost it'll be like in a running relay, put your fastest guys on first, get a massive lead, and then just bring it home with your maybe slower fencer if possible. So there's all these different ways of doing it, which I think is super interesting, and it's unique to para-fencing.
Amazing. And you said about the distance away from each other, that's married up between the 2 competitors. How's that determined?
So I stick my arm out with the sword and I touch your elbow. And depending on the sword, because there's 2 different distances. One is on the inside of the elbow and one is on the outside of the elbow, depending on the sword. And basically the shorter fencer is basically where measures up, and then it's whether or not they can reach there, and that is the distance.
So it's done on the shorter length. So if you so obviously it's not done on the person with the longest reach, and then the person with the shorter reach can't even get there.
Exactly. So always be the person with the shorter reach.
Fascinating.
But they can also, funny enough, I have very short arms. The person with the shorter arm chooses the distance, either their distance, or they can choose to go out to the longer distance if they'd like to.
Amazing. So how much of your training is then split into, I guess, skills, tactics, and then what are you training physically? So like, what are sort of areas that you focus on for your physical training?
Physically, in the gym, we're looking at strength. We go through phases depending on where we are with World Cups, competition-wise, the calendar, strength, power, speed, endurance, and that's all within the gym. It's very much tailored to each person's disability. If I was doing a spinal cord injury person was doing, it would make no sense for me because I wouldn't be training my legs, I wouldn't be training my core. So I think, again, it's very much tailored. Your gym programs, your fitness programs, SSC is tailored to you as an athlete and your ability and what you're capable of. Then we're looking at lessons where we're taking sort of which would be equivalent to pad work with like your coach in like boxing, for example, where that could be whether he'll basically put on a black fencing suit. You've probably seen it in like Zorro and stuff like that, and he's giving you lessons, and whether or not that be he's drilling one move to make you faster at it, or he's teaching you something of, oh, okay, this is the technical movement for this action, this is the timing for this action, this is the tactical implementation. We then have sparring where we can put that into practice. We then have pairs exercises whereby, you're helping each other kind of, okay, well, what about this scenario? I'll be a dummy for you. Oh, I'll practice this with you. We then also have cardio, which is horrible. Again, a really interesting one there for para athletes. Well, what works best for you? Does pushing work the best if you're in a wheelchair? Does ski erg work better? Myself, for example, running is great, but I also fatigues my right leg quite heavily. So sometimes I get a better workout out of actually using the ski erg. So all of these things, again, like they factor into it. And then we have then, of course, like physio, psychology, other things like that. But there's so much to it.
Yeah, no, it is all these sort of like underlying factors that sit within sports that people forget about. I'm going to take a hard left turn.
Sure.
And I'd mentioned it again in our little preamble, but I'd seen you talk around masculinity and disability, and this is a subject that has come up. It's a big topic at the moment. Sure. Masculinity, huge topic, and it's come up in recent podcasts. And I'm curious as to your input on where masculinity and disability have a dance together and what that looks like, and sort of your experience of it as you said, a 30-year-old man, and how disability and masculinity have played in your life so far.
It's really interesting. I think it's definitely something that I've always really struggled with. I think a lot of the preconceptions of masculinity often very opposite and very opposing to preconceptions of disability. And what I mean by that is, if you take, contributing factors to what is a masculine person, what are the stereotypes of masculinity, whether these are correct or not correct, the stereotypes be someone who is strong, someone who is able, someone who is has physical prowess, someone who can provide, someone who can protect, someone, all of those things whereby, even height, even tall people, stuff like that. And it's funny because I noticed I always struggled, I guess, in myself to feel that masculinity and feel like a man and feel, what does that look like for me? And I think it's maybe something that a lot, young men struggle with. And, maybe even young men with disabilities also struggle with, because I did a video on it, like you mentioned, and it were incredible, the feedback that I got from it, saying that people, feeling the same way as me. Because if you look at them, the ideas of what people maybe, the stereotypes of disabilities being like, well, ability to provide, there's a lot of disabled people who are unemployed, there's disability benefits. A lot of people see, people with disabilities on a lower social standing, regardless of physically, to a lot of able-bodied people. Employment is hard when you're disabled. And, look at physical prowess, the idea of disability, it's even in the name, is that, you're less able, physically, am I able to defend myself against an able-bodied person? Well, thankfully, I don't usually have to do so, but, if it came down to it, probably the answer is no. Height, even, a lot of people who they sit in wheelchairs or they have disabilities, they're not of that really tall masculine build sometimes. And I think a lot of these things of like actually, physical prowess, physical ability, strength, whatever it might be, they don't marry up with the ideas, the traditional ideas of what masculinity looks like. And I think that's why these ideas, these preconceptions of disabled people are very damaging, because, people with disabilities can be strong, and they are strong, and physically, impressive people. And there are many disabled people who are very successful as well. And I think these ideas and these misconceptions of disabled people are so damaging. And then on the flip side of that, these misconceptions of what a masculine person must or is, and why that's so damaging in itself, because, you don't have to be physically able to run fast, defend yourself, provide and protect. They're all just things at the end of the day. And I guess it's more so the person's relationship with themselves, their masculinity, or however they associate, that really kind of is the important thing. And I think it's taken me a really long time because one part of me, I want to feel masculine. I want to be physically able. I want to do all these things that fit into the society stereotype. But at the same time, that means associating less with my disability and like almost shying away from it and not accepting my disability. Whereas at the same time, if I'm then trying to accept my disability and myself, it means forsaking all of these ideas of what it means to be a man. Because if I were to measure myself up against the society's idea of what is a man, what is masculine, well, could I beat an able-bodied person in a fight? Probably not. Could I run faster than them? Probably not. Am I more physically able? Can I lift up? Can I carry the shopping and, I don't know, carry my wife over the threshold? Like, it's going to be difficult for me. Those things, physical things that constitute a stereotypical man. Does that make me less of a man? Well, I hope not. And I think in recent years I've come to accept both these ideas of actually, well, no, this is my disability, and I'm okay with that, and I love myself for what I'm able to do. There are definitely things that I'm less able to do that don't make me any less of a man. But I think it's definitely something I struggled with a lot when I was growing up.
100%. This is it's a chasm of a conversation and a topic, because I think a very loud few have created the idea of masculinity being strength in physical form.
Yes.
And success with money in the bank.
Yes.
And what I really think is it's a scale. And it's not a scale in a hierarchical scale. It's a horizontal scale.
Yes.
That it's where you lie on there. And I really think, because you can be masculine, you can be this idea of strong, masculine, have all the money in the world. You can be this, what we would idolize as, or people would think as idolizing a masculine man.
Yes.
But you could be so out of control with your anger that, and I would look at that and go, that's not a man, not someone who's in control. Again, to quote Peterson, you should be a monster, but learn to control it. Now, what that monster looks like isn't necessarily someone who's trying to belittle other people or trying to create tyranny in the world. It's about trying to control the best parts of those parts of you to make you capable, to make you the best of what you are. And really, for me, being a man is being able to use whatever cards you've been dealt to the best of your ability.
Yes.
Now, if you haven't been dealt the best physical cards in the world, then the character that you show with what you have can define your masculinity. That hasn't got to be anger. That hasn't got to be aggression. That hasn't got to be physical stance. But it can be in your courage, your bravery, your kindness. It can be in your hard work, your willingness to be compassionate to other people. All these different parts of you that make you a character. I think masculinity is within character, not physical ability, your stance, your stature.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I've been doing a lot of reading about like Stoicism, and I'm reading exactly chiming to what you said, as Marcus Aurelius said, that a man is someone who not kind of like goes out and fights all these battles and like physically it's got nothing to do with that. It's more so he who masters the battle within his own mind, and like you said, is able to control his own mind, is in control of his body and mind. And it's complete, like you said, is if there's someone who is lashing out, is angry, is belittling people, is spreading tyranny, and there's not someone who's in control of their mind. It's not someone who is at peace with themselves. And I think that this idea of being at peace with your body and your mind, treating the body rigorously so that it will not disobey the mind, putting ourselves through struggles, difficulty, adversity to refine ourselves, improve ourselves, and strengthen our minds and our bodies, and then being in control of those things. I think for me, that's what makes a man. That's when I look at someone, I think he's a good man, like he's a good guy, because he's mastered his body, and I respect that. There is an element of work that goes into whether you're able-bodied, disabled, you've got a spinal cord injury, whatever your disability might be, whatever your body looks like. You've mastered your body, good for you. You've mastered your mind, great, that's it. They're the only two factors that you have that you're in control of. Everything else, like you said, it's the cards you've been dealt, and that's something it's been very difficult for me to come to terms with, and believe within myself, and look in the mirror and say, yeah, you know what, like my left leg doesn't work, but I'm very proud of the body that I've created and I've worked on and I've pushed myself. I'm also very proud of the fact that I lean towards the adventure and I'm able to do the things that maybe my body doesn't want to do, jump into that cold water, push myself hard through that training event, run that 5K, even though my body's screaming at me, I can push myself to do that because I've mastered my body. And then master my mind, and like you said, be gentle, be kind, but have the fierce hunger, the desire, the ferocity to push yourself, to be driven, to be, an animal, but then be kind, and go through whatever life throws at you along the way.
And you're talking about controlling it there, and I think that's so true. I think also the best men are not the ones with the biggest egos, but the ones that are in control of their egos, aware of their egos, and know when to bring it out and when to put it away.
Exactly.
I don't know anyone that I would class as like the best man I know having these huge egos that must be bowed down to. I almost see that as a weakness because I see it as a lack of control. Yeah. And I see it as a lack of a willingness to control that side. It's such a fascinating topic that I think is really important for people to talk more on, and understanding what a man is for them, and understanding what it looks like for you as an individual. Because it's confusing for a lot of guys out there right now. It's confusing for guys to understand what it means to be masculine. Like, what does that look like? And I think it's understanding that whatever you've got dealt with, whatever you have, make the most of it. Make the most with the cards you've been dealt. It hasn't got to be physical. It hasn't got to be success, outward success. It can be in the small characteristics that you pass to people, and the way you deal with people around you, the way you deal with yourself, the way you manage yourself around other people.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's funny because fundamentally these things are constructs, aren't they? You would look at, thousands of years ago, someone who's like hunter-gathering and going out and getting food for his family and then physically able to protect. I don't think anyone back then would have been like, wow, what a masculine dude. You'd just be like, yeah, he's just doing what he's doing. And I think these ideas, especially where you said it's so difficult these days to understand, well, what does it mean to be masculine? Because you've got like social media, you've got like every guy is ripped with a six-pack and has got the biggest shoulders on the planet.
Well, I'll tell you this. See how this lands for you. Have you watched the film The 300?
Yes.
About King Leonidas and the Brave.
Through it the other day.
I literally watched it 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So the film 300 is about King Leonidas and the brave 300 who took on the Persian army of, I think it was 1 million. And the story is like one of the most masculine films you could ever take on. And I love studying that film because people look at it from these guys who are ripped. There's the 300 workout that you can do. There's these guys are just six packs, their shoulders, and they're just Spartans. And there's these amazing masculine lines that come out of it. But also there's this hero's journey that's gone on through it. And if you look at the premise of the film, being a soldier, being someone in the Brave 300, none of it was about them. None of it is about them as an individual. None of it's about King Leonidas. He's there willing to die on his sword, almost hoping to die. Like he talks about being the beautiful death of a Spartan warrior. but they're doing it to serve other people. They're doing it in service for their country, their people, their wives, their children. And then there's the parts of the film that I think people miss in it, which is where he's with his wife and he's having these quiet moments with her, and they're loving moments, but there's also this element of self-doubt that, or even these he's doubting taking these men to war, sacrificing them. He's ending their lives with their families, things like that. And there's this blend of toughness, extreme masculinity with very feminine softness, which is why the queen in the film is an incredible role, because it's someone who brings out that femininity, but also is strong in herself. Yeah, I think he also talks about the line to Persian lord. He's like, "You clearly haven't met our women," things like that. I might as well march them down here. But
exactly,
there's this beautiful dance between him being super masculine and the message, which is all about in service for other people. And again, being a man, being for me masculine, is about how can I be of service with what I've got? How can I be in service of other people for a bigger calling?
I think what I love about what you just said is how he has the strength physically, of course, but the strength to be vulnerable. And I think a lot of people don't have the strength to be vulnerable. And I think, like with these ideas of masculine, if you cry, she'll leave you. Or if you show vulnerability, you're not a man. Like, real men do this. And it's just like, actually, a lot of the realist, and look, this example, like you said, he has the strength, no one's doubting whether or not he's masculine. And then he's actually going there, he's being vulnerable to his partner, saying, listen, like, I'm not sure about this. I'm having doubts. I'm insecure about this. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I'm showing these emotions, and I'm showing these feelings, and I'm having these feelings. I think there's so difficult with today's society of like a lot of, especially maybe of the older generation and people, they don't feel things. They only know how to feel anger. Maybe it's like, actually anger is not because maybe a bit easier to feel than some, I feel lonely. I feel, insecure. Instead, it just comes out as anger because I'm a man. Men don't feel insecure. Men don't feel, lonely because that's a feminine trait. It's not masculine. I'm just angry. And that's seen as maybe the only acceptable feeling or emotion for a man to feel and still remain manly. But what I love about this, like you said, he is being vulnerable. And on the flip side of that, obviously I can't speak on behalf of like the femininity, but the wife who has that like you said, that juxtaposition between being a very elegant, lovely, supportive woman, and at the same time being ferocious, being driven, being strong in her own right. Her husband is off, fighting that battle, and it doesn't matter. She's not there. Oh, my husband's gone. She's strong in her own right. And I think that's so important, not to go off piece, but within a relationship of having, each of us have these, whether it be masculine, feminine, or whatever you associate, strengths, and also having the strength within that to be vulnerable and share that with your partner, and for them to share that with you, because, maybe a masculine strength is different to how, a feminine strength within a relationship. Those can really complement each other. And I think it's such a great example, like you said. It's brilliant.
I think with the opening up and being vulnerable between generations, I think you're right. Anger is a really visceral and easy emotion for especially men to just engage with. Our testosterone, biologically, it sort of just sings to it. So the being vulnerable mixed with societal messages and things like that is a lot more complicated. However, I am very conscious of the voice in the world right now that I think, and seeing this in young men that I have coached and worked with, where they're confused. They're confused as to whether to show some of the strength because they're being told that they must be vulnerable, they must do that. And actually, I think we're on the verge, if not tipping over to that side now, where we're almost softening them to the point of almost nearly sterilizing them, where they
I know
are
what you mean.
unwilling to show that strength through being characterized as angry, predatory, aggressive, anything in that sort of ballpark. And I think that's dangerous, because those strengths, the bravery, the courage, having that strength is what is a part of being a man. It's a part of our biology that we really must have. And while there are people that will not want to access that, and there'll be a loud voice online where people do that, I think as a general, as for many, many men, it's accessing that at the right time. And I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she's married to one of my best friends. And we were talking around sort of masculinity. I was painting their house with them. And she was saying, look, at the end of the day, women want to know that a man can take care of himself, they've now got a family, take care of the family. But it doesn't have to be like that all the time. But there is an element where that is still sexy, that's still attractive, that's still what we want as women. And I think she was talking from a woman's perspective. She's like, there are almost women that are getting too much airtime in saying, you need to be vulnerable, I need to do that. And that, while that is true, and like I'm a culprit of this, and it's a part of me that I'm working on, where I'm trying to be vulnerable, show my emotions with people, and I'm on a journey. I just am cautious with young kids, young men growing up, trying to understand where they sit, that we must encourage them to still be strong, be brave, but control it and open up the door for vulnerability in the right time, and not have that door wide open all the time. That means that they cannot no longer access these strengths that makes them feel capable and can put them towards a goal or an aspiration or just a better version of themselves that will ultimately make them feel better about themselves. That's how we feel good, right? You feel good, I feel good when I feel capable. When I feel capable and I'm in control of myself and what I'm doing and my destiny and what I'm doing, I feel good. But if I'm to sort of like sit back, take stock and be a bit soft on it, it can be dangerous. You can be aimless. And I think that's where some of the mental health issues we face right now lie, is this aimlessness of I don't know where to go, I don't know who to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's really difficult because, on one hand, you in my opinion, is not to be a certain thing, whether it be I want to be strong, I want to be vulnerable. I don't think that necessarily you have to do either. But it's having the strength to be vulnerable if you need to, if the situation so applies, if you feel vulnerable. I don't believe in forcing anyone to feel vulnerable all the time or to feel strong all the time, because it's actually just the way you feel. And if one day you whatever it might be, I think actually, like you said, being in touch with that strength. But I think often we need to redefine what strength is. I don't ever feel as though the strength needs to come across as like, I'm dominating you, I'm shouting louder than you, I'm, intimidating you, because I don't see any of those as strengths. I see strength as someone who is capable, someone who is in control of themselves, someone who is able to withstand difficult situations, someone who has been through difficult situations, and someone who has the confidence within themselves and the acceptance. And so, for example, with myself, I would be proud to say that I feel fairly strong within my masculinity, and I feel like I have strength in that. I would rarely ever exert that strength and feel the need to exert that strength, or to shout louder than other people, or to dominate someone, or to make someone feel small, to make myself feel bigger. I think that's all terrible. And I think that's, like you said earlier, is whereby it's usually those people that actually lack the most strength because they're throwing their ego around. But I think real strength comes from within, and having that ability to control your own mind. I know you mentioned Peterson earlier, but he mentions that, I forget the exact quote and I'm going to butcher it, but something along the lines of, if you're very docile and you're very quiet and you're very peaceful, but you don't have the capacity for violence, then it means nothing, because you're not choosing to be calm and peaceful. You just have no other option. But actually, one should have the ability to be fierce, ferocious, strong, whatever it might be, but then choose to control it, choose to be peaceful, choose to be whatever it might be, because otherwise it really means nothing.
He labels that as you should be a monster, but learn to control it.
Yeah,
and
exactly that.
It's this idea of that. I think people even when he says it and he delivers it in that language, I think people just misconstrue what he means by monster. He's not talking about someone who's actively going out and choosing violence to belittle other human beings. It's about being a monster in capability. Like, I have monster capabilities in myself. I choose to control it. I choose the ability. He also talks about knowing that we all have within us, we all have the ability for incredible violence. Like, it's the distance between us and he puts it quite brashly, Hitler. He said, like, that distance is not as far away as you think it is. It's like, it's a few choices in between there, big choices, but there's a gap that's not as distant as you think. But it's about being capable, learning to control it. No, this has been an amazing conversation, and it's gone on some tangents that I've loved, and it's been great chatting with you. I actually had one that I wrote down midway through that I was curious to ask you, and I'll ask another sort of an ending question from it. But someone like yourself, and I asked myself this question, and I've been asked this question a few times, but is there a part of you that wishes that you didn't have your condition?
It's so funny. It's like the age-old question for you with disabilities is like, if you could take a pill that would like get rid of your disability, like, take it. And like, I think often people say no. And there's certainly a time in my life, I remember when I was young, I would definitely have taken that pill. 100%. I hated my disability. I shied away from it. I remember I used to look, it's super weird. I used to look at like my friends who were doing sport. I used to look at their left legs and be like, I wish I had that. I wish I could swap. I wish I could, have your leg on my body so that I could walk, I could run, I could not be in pain every night. And yeah, I used to hate it. If I was to be 100% honest with you now and say, would I take that pill right now? I think I know the answer is no. And it's so weird to say that out loud because, my leg has been the source of like so much discomfort and anger and self-esteem issues. It stems, it's the heart of, I don't sleep well. I'm in pain every night, almost every day, every moment I'm standing up. It's cost me so much, in my opinion. I've had to sacrifice my whole childhood from having operations, having recovery, to having physio, to having all these treatments on it, and sleeping in a cast every night, and waking up in tears because it was so painful as a young kid. Self-esteem issues. I look at myself like I hate the way I look. I remember seeing for the first time, I used to hide my crutches, lie about it because I hated the way I was. I hated my disability, and it's the foundation of so much negativity within my life. And yet, at the same time, it's the foundation of so much opportunity and so much challenge that I've then overcome. And for me, it represents that. And I was, having gone to the Paralympics and represented my country, and for me, that was the pinnacle of overcoming my disability and taking the opportunities that I've been dealt. I get to do podcasts like this with you, with amazing people. I get to shoot with, really interesting companies and brands, and working with people. I get to go represent my country because of my disability, and, under the monikers of the Agitos and the Paralympics. And, I've had some incredible opportunities working with some brilliant brands to do some cool things. And who do I have to thank for that? My disability, to be honest with you, because I wouldn't have been able to, not to say I wouldn't have become an athlete, but who knows? But the reason I have all these opportunities and I've overcome so much, and I feel like I have a strength today that I don't know what I would have had, it's hypothetical, but the strength that I do have today that I can attribute to my disability. And so for a huge part of me that hated myself and so many aspects of my life, my disability when I was growing up, I have it now so much to thank for who I've become and for the journey and the experiences that I've had. And so I couldn't even think about taking that that, that pill to delete my disability right now, to be honest with you. And it's become something that it's become me. It's like now when I hear that question, I don't separate my disability, and I hear, would you kill a part of yourself? Like, and actually, you know what? I couldn't do that, because as much as there are parts of myself that are imperfect, I think I need work on, I'm bad at, and maybe I'm a bit, whatever it might be. There are parts that need work, parts of me that are unwhole, that I'm incomplete and damaged and scarred in certain ways. They are parts of me, and I think linking back to what we spoke about with masculinity is about accepting those things, accepting yourself, and being at peace with oneself, and not, I guess, wishing for anything else. So yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, it's a question that I don't ask with a lack of like having not asked myself or been asked it. And I think when people have asked me that question, and even if I've asked myself, and it's this thing that I've marinated on quite a long time, and asking myself, would I not have my condition if I could? When I think of that question, I think of it's aimed at everything I have not got, or the things that I have not been able to do, and what I'm lacking, or what opportunities have not come my way. And I always think of like, well, what I have done. I think of what it's created for me. But not only that, most importantly for me has been the character that it's created, the person that I am, the things that I can now help others with, that they find that they are, in no certain words, lacking in themselves. And it's through that I almost feel like it's a privilege to be able to sit in that position, to be able to use the hardship, which everyone has, and we're all imperfect. We all have these quirky things about us, but I think we're forced into an area where we have to accept it, because there's no amount of praying, there's no amount of surgeries, there's no amount of anything I can do that will physically change how I'm made, and that it won't bring those parts of me back, and I cannot change that. So the level of acceptance that's had to happen over time has then allowed me to ask these questions, to see them as a strength, and playing those cards that you're dealt to the best of your ability. I'm sorry I asked you that question, but I thought it was an interesting one.
It's a really good question, and it's something that what fascinates me is that my answer would have been different a few years ago.
Totally, I think for me as well.
Yeah, but it's a good question, and yeah, it's a tough one, I think, and there's also no shame in if someone with a disability is listening to this and they think, God, I would change it. That's fair play, because I think something I said before is that we're all on different parts of our journeys. And I remember, when I was a kid at school, I lied about my disability to everyone. I told everyone I was in a skiing accident or, a bus crash or whatever. And then I went through a phase of like telling people about it, but not accepting it, saying, yeah, I have a disability, but I felt awful about it. And, I still felt like it was a shame. I wish I didn't have it. And to, a different part where I was accepting it, I was okay with it, but still I had a lot of self-esteem issues and difficulties to now I think where I'm closest I've ever been to accepting myself for how I am and being proud of that. And so wherever you are on that journey, there's no right or wrong, or you'll get to a better place. You're at this, because some people may stay wherever they want to stay at different journeys. There's no sort of like, that was my path and my journey, and this is where I am now. Some people might feel differently, and that's okay. And I think it's about accepting where you're at, your relationship with your disability, because every disability is different. And that's what's so interesting about disability. It's this umbrella term for everyone that has something wrong with it, but it can span from someone who's got no limbs to someone who's deaf, to someone who's got partial blindness, to someone who needs to go around in a mobility chair. It's so broad that even if you took 10 of the same disabilities and the same age or the same gender, they would experience it and have relationships with themselves and their own disability in totally different manners. And so it's this ever-changing spectrum that there's really no right or wrong. It's more so just your relationship with your, similar to what we spoke about with your masculinity, your gender, how you associate or whatever that might be to it's like your disability, that how you associate, with your disability.
So true. Look, Oliver, thank you for your time. Before we finish, I always ask a little question for people that are on the show. Is there anything you've got going on at the moment that's inspiring you, whether that's a book you're reading, a quote, a documentary, anything that you've been recommending that could inspire other people?
So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I find that super interesting. It's a bit of a tough read and a little bit boring at times, but I found it really like peaceful in terms of like actually understanding more about myself, and actually learning to kind of control, control my mind and like my emotions. So I've struggled a lot with that recently, and I found it really interesting to kind of just have a different way of thinking that is almost very stripped back from today's view of society. And a lot of the more recent books obviously have like, influences of social media, this, that, society, stereotypes, archetypes of, constructs of what we decide things might be, and, what disabled person is, what a man is, what this and that is. But actually to read a book from so far ago that it's almost removed slightly from all of these things we take for granted now. And it's quite a refreshing opinion on life, which I think is interesting. So yeah, if you guys want to check it out, it's a good one. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
For sure. And where's the best place for people to follow you, to get in touch, to check out what you're up to guide them in any direction?
Oh yeah. So I'm on Instagram. So I'm Oliver Lam-Watson on Instagram, like one word. And that's the best place probably to find me.
Perfect. We'll put the links in the show notes so that people can find you.
Great.
Only thing from me, mate, is it's been a pleasure to chat with you and meet you, and I've really appreciated this time and the conversation we've had. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.